Hello, I'm Julia Fisher, and you're listening to The Olive Tree, the programme that brings you the stories of both Jewish believers and Arab or Palestinian Christians living in Israel and the West Bank. My guest today is Ofer Amitai. He is a Messianic Jewish believer and pastor of a congregation. He lives in the Judean Hills, a few miles west of Jerusalem. The past 7 generations of his family have lived in the land of Israel, and as a consequence, Ofer knows the land better than most. This puts him in a unique position, as the majority of the Jewish population are immigrants from around the world. So I asked him what it means to him to be a believer in Jesus living in Israel today.
Well, I grew up here. I was born in the 50s. My background is my dad was a military officer. I grew up amongst other children who were all from the same kinds of families. Their background is the Palmach and the Haganah, which are the pre-army forces of the Jewish nation. So I've always grown up with a sense of history and a sense of the earth here, the ground here, this nation that was not only rebirthed but was growing out of the ground. And it very much affects the way I see things, of course, and the way I think about things even today.
You grew up in a secular family, so faith and belief didn't have much part in your early life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we were a secular Zionist family. Like I said, my father was in the military. That meant that we had not faith in God, but I grew up with plenty of vision for the land and for our people. So although God was very much in the background, because today I understand that it was the Lord actually bringing us back, there was a sense of something larger than our people and nation always. As a child, as I grew up, I felt that. But yes, I mean, my parents were very secular, Zionist, Tel Aviv area people that were very much practical more. We have to build a nation. We have to realize that this young generation, they were in their 20s, that they shouldered the responsibility for the battle for this land and also the building of it. And that was very much their vision and very much their life.
Let's bring the story up to date now to what you're doing now. You're living outside of Jerusalem. You're living in the countryside. Mm-hmm. And your life is very much involved with prayer and understanding what God is doing at this time. So how does your early life relate to what you're doing now?
I think that in order to pray and to really touch the heart of God, there has to be a component or two that come together. One of them, obviously, is to know God. And that takes time and understanding of Him, His purposes, not just His agenda, but His character and nature. That's one side of it, His thoughts. The other side is very much, I think, that we have to be grounded in how did He do it in history. So we have to understand our history. And we have to understand both our ancient history, biblical one. We have to understand our diaspora or exile history, both biblical exiles and the ones that are more recent. But I don't think you could really, or that you have a full understanding unless you really begin to understand what has God been doing here from the 1800s. How did this nation come about? And what did He have in mind? And so my connection to the past is to me very necessary to understand it. And also to understand this people. You can't, without knowing the people, how can you pray for them? I mean, as a nation. So it's been of huge importance in my life to be rooted this way.
Israel became a nation in 1948, as we know. Your family were here generations before that. And you have been seeing in the last 20, 30 years like a spiritual dawning as well. So Jewish people were coming back, the state was rebirthed, but something else has been going on too. Can you just explain that to our listeners?
I suppose you mean the spiritual rebirth. I see that as part of the unfolding process that God has been working on and through for generations. It was only in the late 60s, after the 67 war, in the beginning of the 70s, that what you see as the body today was birthed. There were, to be sure, people here who were believers, Jewish believers, but they were so few. And the body began to multiply since that time, when God poured out His Spirit in a very gentle way on the workers and prayers and missionaries, people who came from abroad and had invested their lives in believing God and living here. So I see that as just another step. I mean, God brought us and is bringing us back to the land, and God is bringing us back to Himself.
It seems to be a very slow and tortuous process, and it's all being done against this backdrop of the potential war from without and a lot of social upheaval from within.
Yes, I mean, we're in the midst of a struggle. It's not a neat, unfolding little utopic dream, but a struggle of the Bible. The Bible's image for it is a birthing. And very much we are in this struggle. We've come back here from all over the world with different cultures. We have built under duress. We have not come here believing and praising, but God has brought us, as He said He would. He brought our people back and promised that He would reveal Himself here and make us His own. So we see things that are not ideal. And to be honest, some of the inner struggles and injustices and things are as painful and as dangerous to us as the outward ones. But in all that, those of us who have been set to pray and believe God and walk before Him and work here must keep the perspective, which is God's perspective. And that perspective is sure and unrelenting unfolding of the plan and grace of God. That's where it's going.
We'll talk more about the details of that in a future program, but what is your hope? What is it that you're really expecting God to do? What are you expecting to see in the next 3-5 years?
Well, I don't know if it's 3-5 years, but I wish it was. I wish it was tomorrow or tonight, but we don't have the details, but here is what the scriptures actually show. One of the most amazing things is that God will pour out a spirit of grace and supplication. That means, because the Hebrew for it is chen, and chen, or grace, is reflected in the face, that God will reveal His face here. And that means His presence back in the land. It means a tremendous spirit of repentance. It means brokenness of heart. It means such a display of His love and atonement and nearness that will dramatically affect the whole nation. I mean, we have a hard time, I guess, sometimes as believers fathoming such a thing or even imagining such a thing, but we have no problem imagining the destruction of an atom bomb, right? That's physical, and we know that will happen. So I'd call it the atom bomb of grace. I mean, I don't know how else to do it, to say it, but such a forceful thing from the Lord. That's what I'm expecting. I'm expecting our people to be found of God again. I'm expecting a cleansing and a time of revelation such as we've never had as a nation before, because it's under the new covenant now. It be in Messiah. It'll be powerful. It's greater than Sinai. It's greater than all these things. We're not going back. We're going back to Him, but we're going into Him and He with us. So I'm expecting that, and I'm expecting to see things that we can hardly imagine. I mean, Paul spoke about it, that God has prepared things that we cannot imagine or fathom in the love of God. But it's for a whole nation. And not only the nation, but there is a focus in the scriptures on Israel as a key to grace for others as well. So that's what I'm expecting.
So just to put this in a nutshell, you're expecting such a move of God that the whole nation will recognize Him in a moment, just as the nation was born in a moment in 1948. So that will happen in the spiritual sense.
In some way, yes, because that's what the scriptures speak about. I don't want to limit God. I don't want my imagination. I'd rather trust God for more than for less, in whatever way He works it out, yes.
Ofer Amitai, a Messianic Jewish pastor living in Israel. And we'll hear more from Ofer on next week's programme. You're listening to The Olive Tree with me, Julia Fisher. And the Olive Tree Reconciliation Fund is a Christian charity based in the UK that supports the needs of both Jewish believers and Arab Christians living in Israel and the wider Middle East. So if you'd like to know more about our work and receive our free bi-monthly newsletter, please either visit our website, olivetreefund.org, or write to me, Julia Fisher, at the Olive Tree Reconciliation Fund, P.O. Box 850, Horsham, RH12, 9GA in the UK. Join me at the same time next week for another story from the Olive Tree. Until then, goodbye.